Hi, everybody. Just a quick note that Biology Bios is now back for 2025. We're starting out this week with a special episode with one of our graduate students from the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Memphis, who is defending her dissertation this very week. So I hope you'll enjoy this interview with Kendra Wright, soon to be Dr. Kendra Wright. My name is Jim Edelman. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Memphis. And my purpose with this podcast is really twofold. First, I want to let folks know that most Thursdays during the semester, we have talks by visiting researchers at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall. And that's folks from all over the country and world talking about the really cool biological research that they do. The second purpose is to have those folks here learn a little bit more about them, how they got where they are, and what really excites them about the research they do. In addition, I'd like to say a quick disclaimer that I borrowed these questions from Rhett Miller's excellent podcast called Wheels Off, so please check that out as well. But without further ado, let's get to this week's guest. So, Kendra Wright, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Biology Bios.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I generally start out by asking folks to give me kind of the broad brushstrokes of who they are and what they do, what your general interests are in research.
Okay. So basically my research focused on persistence, looking at persistence mainly focusing on, in the biology department, how students progress throughout the major, what factors contribute to that. So with my work, I look at metacognition, which is how students learn. I look at demographics. The main one specifically is how African-American students or Black students, how they're affected throughout that process. And as well as I look at science identity.
And I'm sorry, the last part was?
Science identity.
Oh, identity. Okay. Yeah, gotcha. And so all of that kind of predicting student success, is that a
sure you
too
can
distilled?
Say that. No, that's all those factors contribute to success for students in some type of shape or form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important how you're defining success. Yeah.
So I'm looking at them individually, but we're talking about them in totality of how they can lead to persistence.
Okay. And by persistence, you mean sticking through college or?
For our biology majors, sticking through the program, or that could also mean graduation.
Okay. Cool. So to those folks who might not know you, you are a PhD student about to defend your dissertation. So I was going to ask you, I generally ask, like, what's a project that you're working on right now, and why are you excited about it? So maybe like within this realm that you're talking about and the work that you're doing for your dissertation, or this could be a side project if you're particularly excited about something else. Yeah, what's like, can you dive in a little deeper to one of those specific areas that you're going into, and why is that? Why do you think that's neat?
So I will say all of my work is my passion piece for different reasons. So we're talking about metacognition. I started here at UM as an undergrad doing research on metacognition. So that's always where I have a piece of my heart. I have moved slightly away from that to going into like DEI work. So in terms of like science identity, that's going to be one of the focus that I can see as I leave and go on to for like a postdoc, me still doing work there, because I feel like there's so many aspects you can target with that, such as gender, such as race, such as how the climate of the social environment contributes to that.
So it seems like there's actually a nice, and I actually don't know the literature that well, but I'm wondering if there's a good intersection between those things, right? That talking about science identity and what that means for metacognitive ability, right?
Oh, yeah. So I'm happy you mentioned that. So within my work, I use something called a scientist spotlight. So they phrase it as like a metacognition exercise or activity, but it's used to get students to look at diversity within science, so they can see that there is different types of scientists. Not only are there scientists that are white, but there are Black scientists, Indian scientists. You just have to broaden your horizon and your perspective. And I find that within my project, that a lot of students, they learn not only about diversity, but I feel like within learning about diversity, it helps you see yourself in science, whether that's just being in the classroom, learning about science, or is that being in research, or is that being out in the real world. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I notice pretty stark in so many institutions, right? That oftentimes the faculty doesn't look like the students.
Yeah, that's true here too, if you look at our biology department. But what I like to believe is that sometimes it's not about representation, it's about having support, because I feel like that can trump representation. Because same with here, we may not have a percentage of Black faculty, but what we do have instructors who actually go out their way to support our students.
Yeah. I mean, well, for the listeners who don't know, I'm white. Surprising absolutely no one. But yeah, that's when we think about this sort of stuff from my perspective. And I talked with, my wife about this a lot. Like, so she's Latina, but like that's all we can do, right? We can support people. We can like listen to people and figure out what support is needed and how we can do that, right? Because like I representation, I don't, that's not a thing that I'm going to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I believe there is a such thing of having representation who look like you, but may not share those same connections with you, or may not uphold that same status of what you think their reputation would mean to you. So I think it can be a difference. For example, I would say like with Dr. Sable, when she was here when I was an undergrad, although she does not look like me, she, I felt seen, I felt heard through my research. She would always ask me what were my thoughts about projects, even though I am often quiet and timid. I really don't talk a lot, but she will always include me, even though our was preserved. So
yeah, she's good about that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. So kind of pivot. Well, we'll come back into research, I think, periodically on this. But I do mentioning Dr. Sable and getting involved in research as an undergrad here. I want to kind of ask like, was there a time that you knew you wanted to be a scientist? And you're doing work on biology education research for your research now. Was like, how did you end up going down that path? So science, I guess, in general, and education research in particular.
Oh, that's a great question. So at first I wanted to be a doctor, but I went to like a entry meeting here at the University of Memphis, and there was mentioned like you have to have done research, you have to have done volunteer work, all these type of things. And I was like, you know what, I should try research. And I just, sent the email to Dr. Sable randomly, and she just happened to wanted to talk to me about it. But as time progressed working with her, I learned so much about who I am as a student and the different thought process of how students think. And I found that I related more to those students as I was doing research on them. I think what changed my perspectives from just thinking about doing science to going to become a scientist was that Dr. Sable had asked me about what was I doing over the summer. And I was like, nothing working. And she was like, would you like to do research? And I was like, yeah, sure. Then she was like, okay, how about you get your master's? And I was like, you know what? Sure, I'd love to get my master's. Then 2 weeks later before school started, she was like, Kendra, I think we should change you to a PhD. And I was like, Jamie, I don't know about that one. But, I went ahead and did it because I feel like she was someone who always believed in me. Even though I couldn't see it for myself, she saw it. So I think that's why I say support is always important.
And I think that you hit on a couple different things that come up sometimes in this podcast, but that certainly feel relevant in thinking about my own path, is that like being open to those sort of serendipitous things that just pop up. That like, you sent an email like, oh, I'll see what this Sable lady says, maybe she'll have something. And then all of a sudden you have this cool connection and you're learning more and you're getting excited. And it's just like taking you in this way that like you didn't expect before you wrote that email. And
No.
I feel like that's how I ended up studying birds, is like, I thought neuroscience was super cool. So I took my resume to everybody, and the person that had space was working on bird song learning. And like, I just kind of went down this path, and then at various stages, like those sort of interactions happen, and you have to be open to them.
Yeah. Yeah. What Jamie has taught me that, you have to take these opportunities, whether it's good or whether the outcome is good or bad, you will learn something through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important, right?
Yeah.
Those things that you're like, oh, I don't like that. That's important too.
Because I feel like that about writing. A lot of times I write for like different types of like positions, or trying to get into like some type of fellowship. Half the time I don't get them. But when I talk to Jamie about it, she always tell me, well, from this experience, now that you know, like, hey, this is what you can do better. So I go in the next time thinking about my work differently, or not thinking I wasn't competitive enough, but thinking, okay, so if that didn't get me in, how can I elevate what I'm doing to really showcase and make it clear, clean, and cut of this is who I am?
There's definitely a metacognition thing there, right?
Yes.
Because doing those fellowship applications or grant applications, they force you to think about these questions that you've been thinking about. And in that act, right, of being like mindful of what you're asking, and in a way that you can communicate it to somebody else, that really shapes how you interact with that idea. Yeah,
and it shapes how they think about the work that you're doing, because if I don't clearly communicate what I'm doing or what I want to do, then they're not understanding. So it may be inside my mind, but if I can translate it over to paper, so people can see my ideas and buy into that, it's not all being useful.
Yeah, yeah. So much of what we do is writing, and like, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about generative AI lately, and like what that's going to look like in the future. But like, I think still, as good as that's gotten, right? Like, I think still right now, it's so important that we're able to actually take those thoughts from our head and put them on paper ourselves.
Yeah, I think AI helps with like breaking down the process of, okay, if you're writing a paper, this is how you should explain the material. But I feel like overall is you have to put yourself into your work. Yeah. And that's what's really get people thinking about who you are, why they should be interested. Because, it's partially with AI, it's great for some things, but for overall thing, it does not represent you at all.
Yeah.
It's generic.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it'll do a pretty good job of giving you a generic structure. But yeah, one of my favorite quotes is a Lou Reed quote that's between thought and expression, there lies a lifetime. And I think that's still true. Even if AI can give you a structure of how to like frame your thoughts, like you still got to work pretty hard to get what's in your brain out there. Okay, so a little pivot here. I feel like I'm missing a question. If I remember it, I'll come back to it. But I ask folks about those sort of internally generated obstacles that we make for ourselves, the doubt and the second guessing, and which, I mean, I certainly have. I think everybody does to some extent. And I wonder how, especially from your perspective as somebody who's just kind of towards the end of that PhD process, how have you found to kind of deal with the inner critic over these years?
So I think it's very hard to deal with because, I went from a bachelor's to gain a PhD. So often I feel like because I don't have that buffer, I went from like writing paragraphs and thinking that's how you're supposed to write to actually learning how to write a paper.
Yeah.
And I feel like that process has been longer than what it should have been. But
all right. So I'm sorry, from the outside, like I feel like you're on track. Like you did this PhD in like, what is this your fifth year? Yeah. That's how long it takes.
Yeah, but I've been working on the same paper for like 5 years.
Well, we've all got those.
But I think for me, one of the biggest things I've learned is that, for myself, I often have have gained validation from Jamie, I'll always ask her, Jamie, what do you think about this? How can I represent myself in my writing? And she was like, Kendra, you're this, you're that, you're this and that. And I was like, I am all those things. So, but I told her, we were in lab meeting, I told her a couple months ago, I told her I was going to try to have more confidence in who I am because, like she mentioned, I am all those things, but why don't I recognize those things for myself? Why do I need validation from someone else to see or to tell me that I'm the person that I've been every day? So,
I mean, that's another one of those like lifelong things for me, at least, right? Yeah. That like, and it's really helpful to have those sorts of people around.
Yeah,
right?
It's so helpful. But then it's like, at the same time, it's like, self, why don't you see that for yourself?
I mean, I think that comes with practice, I guess. Yeah. Definitely for me, it's one of those things that like, it also comes with some acceptance of like, that's probably going to vary day to day. Mm-hmm. Some days I'm going to be like, I am crushing it, and I'm just going to be feeling great.
Yeah.
And that is not going to be every day. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think a lot of folks have talked about that community, right? That having, because it's, you think about like the things that you would say to your friends. Mm-hmm. I would never be as critical and mean to my friends as I am to myself in my internal voice,
That's true, because they're your friends. You don't want to hurt them.
Yeah. And it's like, but I should probably be a little more friendly to myself.
That is absolutely true.
So yeah, it helps to have that community to remind you of that,
Yeah, because I often think I've suffered from imposter syndrome of thinking that I don't belong. But it's like,
we all do.
You're about to graduate. How can you still feel like you don't belong when you're about to cross the thresholds?
Yeah.
So I think I faced challenges with that, but I've been trying to not celebrate the small wins, I would say.
That's great.
Like when I do write something and acknowledge for myself, hey, you made this accomplishment today. This should be celebrated. Because at one point, you couldn't write a whole page in a day. You was only writing paragraphs a day. Yeah. So, that's been helpful.
I still, like, sometimes I write a sentence and I'm like, that sentence was good. Yeah. And just taking a second to be like, ooh, all right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Celebrate the little victories. That's really good. So that definitely dovetails into this idea of ask people what advice they would have for a version of themselves, like an undergrad version of themselves, working in today's world of research, biology, science. And I'm particularly interested because, like you said, you went from undergrad to a PhD program. So like for me, that was some number of years ago. And so it's a little fuzzier to think of like, what was I struggling with then? But like for you, what advice would you give the, 5 years ago version of yourself?
I think I would just tell myself to stay open, which I feel like I have, and go with the flow, because I feel like, I always tell myself, if things come too difficult, it's not meant for you. If things just gel and it's automatically, it feels natural, that's a path that you should travel. But if you know it's within that path, like you need to be challenged, that's totally different. But if you're trying something, each time you try, like with trying to go to medical school, each time I try to make an effort, it was challenging each time. But as soon as I navigated to research, it was like, it was like a symphony. It just fell in place for me. And it was like, I didn't know why, but it just clicked.
Yeah.
So I think overall, I would just tell myself 5 years ago to just, go into research earlier, to just to have that more experience, but also to try to expand my thinking about different types of research. Because, I love what I do, and I think what I do is amazing. And I know it's a community out there for us, such as Sabre and ABT. But so often it's always a community outside of a community. We're not essentially a community like at the University of Memphis. We are a small population of a community here.
Yeah.
So I think I would try to collaborate have Jamie to collaborate with other parts of the department so we can integrate ourselves slowly.
Yeah, because there is this, whether it's a real or perceived divide. No, that's not the right way to say it, because I think it is real, but I don't want to like overstate it. You know, I don't want to be like, oh, we don't want to talk to people that do biology research. But like the thing is, like, our department is the Department of Biological Sciences. We're not the Department of Biology Education, right? So like you're this different take on it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I also will add that if you're coming into biology education research in a space that's only biological science and you're not really embedded within that space, or no one's trying to ingrain you in that space, you're only being pushed around to do the educational part of it, you're not ever going to find a sense of belonging in this space. You're never going to feel like what you're doing is valuable or adding anything outside of the beauty you feel from teaching. Now, I feel like at other institutions, or like I said, when we do go to different types of SABR and NABT, those communities, they're so welcoming and open. But when you come back to your university and you feel more like an outlier, like you're just here.
I think that they're like, I don't know. I think I can relate a little bit to that in that, like, even within like people that work research animals or something, like, because I research birds, but like there's always like our lab is like, you know, we know what we do, right? You know, we're like this community of like, okay, that we think these things are really cool. But then, you know, somebody who does research on, you know, plant genomics or something, right? They're coming at this very different perspective. So it's like, it takes a little bit at those conversations to be like, okay, let's get on the same page. Like, what are we both interested in? What are the tools that we're using similarly? And I think that, you know, that can be hard at times. And I think it's worth having both of those communities, right? Where you do have those people that are doing the different specific types of research. And then you get to go to the conferences with the people that are doing very much your type of research.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I feel like you get two different type of feedback from those situations, because I feel like when we go to competitions, a lot of their feedback is directly focused on our work. It's more centered and guided from what we're showing them. I feel like, such as like when I do seminar here, the feedback I do get is primarily from the people who are interested in the work. But if I do get someone who's just, you know, asking the question, their question still holds value because they're asking for something of how can this be applied to their course or something like that. So.
Yeah, which is always kind of fun to get those outside questions. They're like, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about it from that direction. So what do you do? I know as a PhD student, you do an awful lot of sciencing and research, but what do you do when you are not sciencing and researching?
My favorite thing to do is watch movies and watch TV shows. Like, I can binge watch a TV show all day long. Like, right now, I'm watching Bold Type, and I've seen all the episodes. But now, I'm on season 5 once again. But that's something I really enjoy doing, understanding how other people think. Even though it's like television, to understand someone else's storyline and how they end up in those predicaments is so interesting to me.
I personally feel like we're in a golden age of television. Like, there's so much good stuff out there right now. Yeah. And that said, I've also been like rewatching some things that like I needed some extra optimism in my life, so we started rewatching Ted Lasso, which is just over the top optimistic. Like, and I was like, yeah, I need that. I need a little infusion of that right now.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes I do that with Steven Universe. And it's so positive.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm feeling sad or something. I'm like, you know what? They don't really have bad days. So I should go and see what's going on.
Yeah, you gotta have that. You gotta have a little escape.
Yeah.
So what else? I'm gonna turn this back on you. What else do you wish that I had asked you about that I didn't ask you about?
You know what? You did not ask me how I feel about graduating, but
Tell me.
I often find it very interesting. It's not like I'm thrilled I'm graduating, but it's not like I'm sad about graduation. But I find myself in between the middle because I feel like I'm shedding a life here that I've got comfortable with,
Yeah.
But I know that I need to grow, and I know that I can't grow in this space anymore. So I feel like that is a positive thing that I'm graduating, that I'm trying to promote myself and to go into a different space.
Yeah.
Where I can expand on my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Nice. That's a good place to be. I feel like that's a sign of being ready to graduate. That's like, I'm not like, well, I asked the chair of our department, I was like, can I stay another year? Because it's like, it's so comfortable here. And he was like, you have plenty. Get out of here. But yeah, I think that's definitely a sign that it's the right time.
Yeah, because last year, Jamie was pushing me and said I could have graduated last year. And I was like, Jamie, I don't feel like I'm ready. And she was like, Kendra, you really are ready. But the conversation we had, it didn't really settle into this year. And I realized that, I don't think I think I was ready last year, but I think it was that comfortability thing of being in a space where I have had success and I know what to do. I don't have to learn anything new. Or if I want to do a project tomorrow, I can just come up with one and do it.
Yeah.
So I think it was more of that and just wanting to chase a different study and add to my work before I left.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, that's a great place to be in that sort of late stage of the PhD. Yeah. So, so dare I ask what you're thinking about next steps?
So I would love a postdoc, but right now it's like, they're bleak. It's not really that many out there because, of, society.
Yeah, that's one way to say it.
Yeah, we're going through a lot of changes, and the type of work that I do is not really on an up and up right now. It's kind of, you have to rethink about it and try to be like successful all versus success for this group or that group. And so I really have to change the perspective or the lens that I'm looking at my research through.
Yeah, that's a tough pivot. And I've talked to a lot of people in the last month about that. Even, folks who, like my research program is not about DEI, but I've always come into like the broader impact parts of NSF proposals with that in mind. And like, now I'm like, wait, so there's a bunch of no words that we can't say anymore. Yeah, that's weird, man.
I know, right? But I'm still looking for postdocs. There has not been a lot of them out there. I have applied for some and had interviews, so I'm just waiting to hear back. But nice. I'm really interested in gaining more quantitative experience because I feel like all I know is really qualitative with coding and getting things from students of what they're saying. Yeah. So I feel like it would be really cool to step into a different space. So when I do go up for a faculty position, I can, and I eventually have my own lab, I can build up my lab with having both those skills at the same time. Yeah,
that's mixed methods is what people used to say that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And I've seen, a number of examples basically from knowing Jamie and the researchers that she's brought to campus over the years, seeing people that do blend those, I think is super cool.
Yeah, and it's such a real power to be able to do both. Although I do believe, and I stand firm on qualitative is very much so better than quantitative work, but that's just because that's just what I believe. Doesn't make it true, because a lot of people don't think that way. Yeah. So I do think having the two really supports each other.
Yeah.
It makes your work stronger.
Yeah. And I think with so many things, right, you've got these different tools that are going to allow you to approach different questions. Or maybe it's the same question, but approach it from different
angles.
ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that would be cool. Yeah, to our many listeners who have their, I wish we had more listeners, Kendra, but we got somebody looking for a postdoc here, so
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. So yeah, Kendra is going to be getting her dissertation to her committee in like days to hours to days. Like she's right at that cusp.
By the end of the night, maybe,
So at this incredibly busy time, it is so awesome that you took the time to chat with me. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm looking forward to reading that dissertation.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks again to our guest, Kendra Wright, soon to be Dr. Kendra Wright. You can see her dissertation defense presentation on February 27th, 2025 at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall 100. We'll look forward to seeing you there, and thanks so much for being here.